Founded in 2021, Root to Heaven is a charitable organization inspired by the way Indigenous people live in harmony with the earth. At Root to Heaven, we have 3 key initiatives: reforestation, regeneration, and rewilding. We reforest by replacing trees in deforested areas, and by reintroducing indigenous plants, we help rehabilitate native ecosystems. Soil is life. Regeneration rebuilds soil organic matter and restores degraded soil biodiversity, resulting in both carbon drawdown and improving the water cycle. Animals will naturally rewild themselves into healthy environments. Wildlife and plant life work in harmony with each other to steward ecosystems that are resilient and full of life. At Root to Heaven, we focus on our relationship with Mother Earth because we acknowledge that all of life comes from and is supported by the Earth. The Earth gives us everything we see and everything we need, from the air we breathe and the water we drink, to the food we eat, to the places we live and our transportation, and the clothing we wear and everything we use in order to live. Even our bodies are made of earth, and our mission is to help reestablish the awareness and connection that we all have to the earth, to innate wisdom, integrity, and knowledge of how to read the book of nature. We understand that as we become more integrated into nature, the connections in our lives are also strengthened. We find a sense of belonging in nature, within ourselves, and to each other. Direct exposure to nature is essential for early childhood development, as well as the overall health of children and adults. According to the Child Mind Institute, unstructured play promotes creativity and imagination. Caring for living things teaches us responsibility, and outdoor time is a form of exercise that helps children and adults to focus. Families who regularly get outside together tend to function better. The studies point in one direction. Nature is not only nice to have, but it's a have-to-have for physical health and cognitive function. Connecting with the earth slows our heart rate. It can lower our blood pressure and stress hormone levels, reduce nervous system arousal, enhance immune system function, and improve mood. Attention deficit disorder and aggression lessen in natural environments, which also help speed the rate of healing. In a recent study, a psychiatric unit found that being in nature reduced feelings of isolation, promoted calm, and lifted the mood of patients. Gardening, farming, and rebuilding ecosystems has also shown an increased success rate for people overcoming addiction. Exposure to nature translates into more community cohesion and substantially lower crime rates. Vegetation abundance is associated with a reduction in assault, robbery, and burglary. In our first year, and in partnership with Flowering Sun Ecology Center, Heart and Mind Festival, and MICE, Root to Heaven planted almost 16,000 trees in 5 locations on 2 continents. In 2022, we plan to plant 100,000 all over the U.S., working side by side with people just like you, and in communities and cities just like yours. With educational programming and workshops for all ages, planting ceremonies, and expert-led trainings. In 2022, we'll launch Family Tree, bringing individuals, families, communities, and organizations together to create large-scale urban and rural reforestation projects. Family Tree is designed to strengthen our connection to our environment, our community, Mother Earth, and one another. Bring Root to Heaven to your city by contacting us at roottoheaven.com. We thank you for your part in ensuring that we can all enjoy nature, that our connection to life flourishes for 7 generations to come, and that the waters of the world are free to run pure and clear.
Beautiful. Thank you for that video, Nicole. I'm just going to introduce you unless there's a specific bio we have on hand. So I'll just introduce Nicole. So Nicole is a very dear friend, first and foremost, and part of the Soul family here. And we are incredibly grateful to Nicole and her work with Root to Heaven, as you just saw in the video, which intends to plant many, many tens of thousands of seeds and trees this year, because they are planting many, many of those tens of thousands of seeds and trees here this year. And that's pretty exciting, right? So Nicole is also a student of Maestro Manuel Rufino and part of the community in New York. And so we're both kind of in the same general training and lineage, and we're also have collaborated. Nicole has been here to Sanctorum Ecovillage and has also participated in one of the HeartFire festivals before. And so we are very excited to be continuing to collaborate and very inspired and amazed by the work that you're doing, Nicole, in the world. I believe that many of the trees that you've been planting have also been supporting the First Nations where you live in the Northeast, and the Mohawk and other First Nations of that region. And so that's really inspiring, and just generally so excited for Nicole to be coming here in July. And if people are interested in volunteering and helping out, there may be a short quarantine period, but we'll talk more about that later if you want to help with some tree planting later this year. And I'll just hand it over to Nicole, who is the founder of Root to Heaven and a magician of many, many other endeavors that I won't go into right now.
Thank you so much to Yasha. Thank you to everyone who's here today with us. Thank you to the entire crew at Sanctorum and to the producers and innovators and visionaries behind this event, behind Sanctorum Ecovillage and the HeartFire Festival, and all of the beautiful work that's being done in Colorado with this amazingly powerful and unified community. It's a really, really good example, and I'm honored and grateful to be here. And I am grateful to share the work of Root to Heaven. As you saw in the video, we're a pretty young organization, and we have big work. And I feel very blessed and fortunate to say that we will far exceed our planting goals for this year, as I've already sown 30,000 seeds and planted several thousand trees into the earth this past 5 weeks. And I'm just really grateful to continue the work. As Yasha mentioned, we have been building a beautiful relationship and connection with some Six Nations people here locally in Aguasasni, which is near the Canadian border, and which to us feels like a very amazing and auspicious connection, because they are the people, the Mohawk, that planted the Tree of Peace and that created the Treaty of Peace, which our Constitution in the United States is based upon. Super looking out into the next month and just so excited to come back to Colorado to be with that land and to be with the community. And as Yasha mentioned, we're going to be doing a large-scale reforestation project in Colorado at Sanctorum. And very much in the tradition of the elders and in the tradition of new paradigm and regenerative, not just farming and agriculture, because I think this is something that a lot of us are very familiar with, but regenerative reforestation. We're starting from the ground up, and we're starting with the soil, and we're starting with all of the soil ecology and biodiversity that is necessary. And we're going to go into that in a little bit in a presentation, but I will ask for the Maestro Domingo video to be shared. And this is a video from an event that Roots Heaven had a couple of months ago. Maestro Domingo is the elder of our lineage and just one of the most beautiful teachers alive on the planet today. So enjoy.
Maestro Domingo Diaz Porta was born in Caracas, Venezuela in 1930. Under his guidance, the initiatic sovereign solar order of Chichen Itzá has developed in different places in Venezuela, Mexico, the United States, in Europe, and Peru. He has founded and organized cultural and spiritual activities in almost all countries in the Americas, in 10 European countries, in Israel, and in Morocco. He is the founder of the Association of the Solar American Indian (MAIS) movement of cultural approach to the autonomous traditions and peoples of the continent. He is also the founder of Acción por la Unidad Mundial, Action for Global Unity, a movement of international cultural integration to promote a culture of peace through dialogue of personal transformation, through exchange of knowledge, and joint participation in activities and programs, both on the individual and group level. Welcome, Maestro Domingo Diaz Porta. Thank you.
Hello, dear brothers and sisters. A few words only to tell you that in order to understand life, it is more important than the flowers, the fruits, the branches, the trunk, the roots. It is more important the soil. Trees are part of the qualities of the soil, and the soil is an expression of the land, and the land is an expression of nature, and nature is a manifestation of the life of our planet. In our planet is expression of our galaxy, the Milky Way. So we must not insist in individuals separated, but in the community, the society, the land, the planet, the solar system, the galaxy, the universe, a global vision. In order to understand life, in order to understand what we are really, we need to cultivate this universal vision, this identification with the unity, the totality. So we will become centered in the truths, not in doctrines and concepts, but the universal laws that govern our life. That's my message for you in this moment. I send you my best wishes to keep walking in the central paths, the path of the center, the middle way, as the Buddha says. No going to the one side or the other side, but keep the balance in your life. Well, my best wishes for you, light in your paths, love and right understanding for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I wanted to share this video because when we talk about soil and when we talk about the health of an ecosystem, we can't do that without including everyone. And that inclusivity isn't just human related. We can't continue to build gardens and lawns for ourselves while our neighbors are hungry or starving or whatever that's going on with them. So when we are planting a forest, we're not just tending to the trees and we're not just tending to the plants. we're tending to the soil, because the soil is a neighborhood. And it's a neighborhood of biodiversity, of all kinds of organic matter and life forms that help to balance our entire planetary ecosystem. So, healing the soil is part of a larger prayer and vision to bring people together and to go through a larger process of inclusivity and finding a sense of belonging. And I would love to start the presentation here. Please, thank you. All right, so from the ground up is very much how we are coming together to not just do an ecological rehabilitation with our family and our dear, dear friends in Colorado. We are coming together to pray with the earth and to pray for the world. And every tree and every seed and every plant and every flower that we plant is a prayer for peace and for unity and for harmony between all life forms. And that includes animals, plants, and elements, because the elements are out of balance. So we are coming together to offer a lot of really good prayers to rebalance the way that the elements are existing together through our actions. So we can go to the next slide, please. As we saw in the opening video, Root to Heaven is an organization dedicated to rehabilitating the different ecosystems of the earth. We do that primarily through 3 roots or branches: reforestation, regeneration, and rewilding. Next slide. Our mission is to work alongside communities, municipalities, individuals, and trusts to plant 1 million Indigenous plants within the next 5 years. In doing this, we hope to become a leader in regenerative culture and carbon drawdown and an internationally recognized and trusted organization for ecological rehabilitation, climate, and humanitarian solutions. Next slide, please. We're really grateful and excited to be planting at Sanctorum Ecovillage. I am just in awe of the education that I've been receiving as I have been researching all of these different ecosystems that we're planting in. Sanctorum is located in the upper Sonoran Desert, and this is known as the driest biome on the earth. And yet it has the most species diversity of any desert in North America, which is very exciting because that means it has the most amount of plants in any desert here. And the upper Sonoran Desert, specifically where we're going to be reforesting, is a prairie grassland. Next slide, please. And just a quick kind of information. Not everyone knows what a biome is, and that's an important thing to know. So it's a large naturally occurring community of flora and fauna, which occupies a major habitat, such as a forest or a tundra. We have our external biomes and we have our internal biomes, and those two things are related. Our gut microbiome is an expression of soil ecology and soil health, and what minerals and nutrients are available in the soil that our food is growing in. And this is why regeneration, regenerative agriculture, and regenerative reforestation, which includes regenerative agroforestry and regenerative agriculture as part of it, because there was no separation many hundreds of years back between a forest and a farm. The food grew in the forest naturally, and everyone had enough to eat. And so we're really leaning into that ancient traditional wisdom and that ancient way of caring and these regenerative practices, which we call regenerative, but maybe our grandparents or their parents would say this is traditional knowledge that we all have. So we're leaning into the ancient heart to awaken our vision and understanding of how to care for the earth. Next slide, please. So I want to just share about the Sonoran ecosystem because I was very amazed at all of the different beings that live there. The landscape and species diversity in this desert, it rivals that of any terrestrial ecoregion on the earth. Nearly all of the planet's biomes are represented. I think there's one or two that aren't represented with the Sonoran Desert. And the desert itself ranges from cold conifer forests to hot deserts, where the frost is nearly absent and participation is really rare. The desert is home to at least 60 species of mammals, 350 bird species, amphibians, 100 reptiles, and about 30 species of native fish, which is really amazing because when we are reforesting and regenerating in the way that we are going to be approaching it, one of the things that we're doing is we're praying with everyone in mind. We're planting these things for the neighborhood, and the neighborhood is all of the ecology that's surrounding the area where we're going to be planting in. So it's all of these species of plants and it's all of these species of animals as well, making sure that we're doing the work that we need to do in order for them to know that they have a place to come to find food and to find shelter. Next slide, please. So I'm going to just touch on traditional landscaping and regenerative ecosystems because this is not a landscaping job. Absolutely no offense to anyone who's doing landscaping at all. But traditional landscaping fosters extreme dependence on human labor. It requires chemical input through pesticides and fertilizers that can actually really be damaging to the ecosystem, to the soil, to the water table. It requires a lot of trimming to maintain its perfect form, and it uses a great deal of irrigation, and that also weakens the ecology of the landscape because, as I mentioned just a moment ago, it's tapping into the water table. And a lot of the times the water tables that they're tapping into don't have the water to support that kind of need of water. So traditional landscaping, they also attempts a kind of one-size-fits-all approach in the landscaping, abandoning diversity and indigenous ecology and creating an unpalatable habitat for domestic species. And as you see, a lot of yards, and I have this even with my family, and slowly they're starting to open up. But, my father says, oh, well, I can't plant that there because of the deer. And I'm like, no, plant it there because of the deer. And so it's all about keeping pests and keeping things out of your yard, out of your land. But regenerative ecosystems is about inclusivity. And one of the most impactful things I ever heard my teacher say many years ago was that healing is inclusive. And as we heal the land and as we heal the earth and as we heal our own understanding, because that's what this is really about, the earth and the land will eventually heal themselves if we stop disrupting them. But we're healing our own understanding as to how to be in harmony with the natural cycles of nature and the earth. We are doing that with everyone in mind, as we said, with all of the different beings, all of the life forms. So regenerative ecosystems mimic wild ecosystems that you find in nature. And it's a landscape that can thrive without a lot of inputs, without lawn care treatments, which means no pesticides, no fertilizers, because other things are being used, like compost, in planting different kinds of permaculture or in planting like biodiverse gardens or farms. We're using a lot of plants that deter certain animals, not all of them. We want to feed the neighborhood. So it's natural that if you're planting a really juicy orange or a really juicy tomato, that, you know, the bugs are going to get to that. And that's how we know that's good food, because where the animals go, we know there's a lot of nutrients there. By incorporating water absorbent features, native plants integrate food production into the landscape and locally sourced materials for plants. So we're using, specifically in Colorado, a lot of locally sourced timber, a lot of locally sourced wood chips, a lot of locally sourced manure to help rebuild the soil, which will take about 2 years to build. It used to be that it took a really long time to rebuild soil, topsoil. But now, with the knowledge that we have, it's taking people, specifically in this biome, in this area, about 2 to 3 years with good vigilance to rebuild topsoil, which is what we need. Topsoil, it draws carbon down, it fixes nitrogen, it puts a lot of really, really healthy, clean water back into the water cycle. Next slide. Speaking of the water cycle, I'm sure that you've all seen diagrams like this before, because they were in our elementary and middle school education, but it's probably been a while. So this is how things work, and this is why regenerative agriculture and regenerative reforestation doesn't use pesticides and doesn't use fertilizers, because everything that we put into the earth gets absorbed into the soil and gets picked back up into the water cycle, and then it becomes part of our water table, and it contaminates the water table, and then we're drinking that and we're watering our food with it, and our children are affected and our families are affected and the soil is affected. So at some moment we need to take responsibility and stop that. The cycle itself goes like this. Water in different phases moves through the atmosphere, which is called transportation. Liquid water flows across the land. This is called water runoff. The runoff runs into the ground through infiltration and percolation. It's absorbed into the ground and it becomes groundwater. Groundwater moves into plants through plant uptake, and then it evaporates from plants into the atmosphere through transpiration. And then it comes down again, and it starts just like that, through rain, through mist. I don't know how many of you have been out in the morning at dawn, but if you notice and you go out before the sunrise, there's a bunch of dew covering all of the plants and the ground and the grasses. And that dew is part of this process, and it's part of how the water comes back to the earth. And it's a very special water, that dew. Next slide, please. So touching upon this, it's not an idea, because ideas exist in the mind, and this is something that exists in the heart and in our hands. So touching upon this action, this generative action of new paradigm reforestation, once again, regenerative reforestation is based in rehabilitating entire ecosystems and not just parts. It requires a systematic approach to ensure efficacy and success. Mass afforestation has resulted in dangerous depletion of water, and we're going to talk about this in just a moment. In our collaboration with Sanctorum Ecovillage, we'll regenerate from the ground up, starting with seeds, grasses, weeds, covers, mycorrhiza, mulch, local timber, and other biomasses. By building soil biodiversity, we're setting a solid foundation for the first layer of the forest and ensuring that plants will have strong resiliency. Once established, healthy soil ecology supports biodiversity with less water and has been known to reestablish waterways, which then feeds all plant and wildlife through the water cycle. So we have living soil and living water. And this is the case of what happened with the Terra Foundation when they were reforesting the acreage in Brazil, which is now a national park, the first year, just the first year, 130 different waterways came back to that land that was being reforested. And now it's more than 1,000 rivers and streams and ponds and lakes through a process of rebuilding the soil and slowly rebuilding the forest, because there's a relationship there that's really intrinsic and sacred. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we are praying in the direction of reestablishing harmony, not just with the animals in the biome or the plants that we're going to be planting, but between all of the elements in the entire ecosystem, in the entire biome of Colorado and the Sonoran Desert. And it sounds like a really big idea, but it can be done, and it has been done. And one of the people that participated in the project with the Terra Foundation will actually be presenting about their work and process at the upcoming Root to Heaven event called Origins. I do want to touch on Aforestation. So we all know, because we're interested in sustainable living, how important it is to reforest. We all know that we need to plant as many trees as possible, and then that's going to be good for the environment, et cetera, et cetera. It's something that we believe in, and it's something that many of us are already doing. However, it is not always that planting a bunch of trees is beneficial for an environment. First, the plants and the trees need to be native to the environment. Otherwise, they can be invasive and they can very, very deeply disturb a biome or an entire ecology. Secondly, not every reforestation project should only be about trees. It's like making a painting and you have to paint a rainbow, but you're only using the color blue. It's going to be difficult to get your rainbow with that, because trees belong to an ecosystem and a habitat and an environment which include understory and soil and flowers and fruits and shrubs and mosses and fungi and animals and all of these things. So as we are regeneratively rehabilitating and reforesting, we need to really consider all of the colors and all of the different plants that need to go into reforestation. Lastly, afforesting, if it's not done well, and to be done well, we need to tend the soil and tend the relationship between soil and water, because afforestation will really deplete water from the water table. And if you're living in an arid place or a place that's already facing water shortage, and you're reforesting and you're not taking care of soil ecology and building the microdiversity or the biodiversity of the microorganisms in the soil, which are going to really protect the use of water and make it so that the trees need less water once the forest is established and once the soil is established, then you could be really damaging a different source of a resource, I'd say, water, in that ecosystem and in that environment. So keep planting trees, plant them with shrubs and bushes and covers and grasses and weeds, and make sure that the soil is in a good place so that we're understanding the entire ecology. And as Maestro Domingo Diaz-Porto is saying, this kind of universal vision of all of these interdependent systems that need to be functioning healthy. They don't all have the same job. They're not all going to do the same work, but they rely on each other to do what they do best so that they can fully function at their max capacity and rebuild a healthy ecosystem. Next slide. Okay, so Indigenous planting is also really beneficial here. And when I say indigenous planting, it just means that we are planting the plants that are native to the ecosystem, as I was mentioning earlier in the last slide and early in the presentation with the biome. Indigenous plantings are native to that area. They're not invasive. They're not going to damage the ecology. They're going to rebuild it, reestablish it, and fortify it. Indigenous planting saves waters. No fertilizers are needed. No pesticides are needed. There's resistance to local weather. It is rarely invasive. There is erosion control, so soil erosion control. Things like pesticides and fertilizers really erode the soil. And that becomes a very, very big issue later on. Native planting restores natural habitats and it preserves biodiversity. And when we go to seed the first layer of the forest at Sanctorum, we're starting with 7 native plants. So we have this in mind and in our prayer to make sure that we're putting only things that are going to be of great benefit to the ecology there. Can we go to the next slide, please? And the functions of a healthy ecosystem are the following. They provide food for all of the inhabitants. They provide clean water and waterways, shelter. They can give us a livelihood. They offer recreation, and they are full of natural beauty. And this is, again, for everyone, animals, plants, bacteria, fungi, human beings, for everyone. Next slide. So, strengthening the family tree. The forest addresses the needs of billions of families, people, animal, and plant. As we reclaim our connection and interdependence with nature, we recover knowledge and dignity, belonging and abundance, understanding that each family has a role to play in regenerating Earth. And we discover that sacred ecology is an inside job. So we follow the Hermetic principle, as within, so without. And we understand that our inner soil is just as important as our outer soil, which is one of the real tenets and visions of Family Tree as a key initiative for Root to Heaven in the next 5 years, is creating these opportunities for families or people, communities, neighborhoods, municipalities to come together and build something together. And that process of caring for a shared vision, caring for something larger than yourself, for something that's going to be of benefit to many, many different kinds of species and beings, not just people, we find a sense of real responsibility, interdependence, sense of belonging, a sense of being of service to something larger than us, and care. And as we care for the earth cares for us. And this is one of the biggest teachings I think I've received with Root to Heaven, to have, this prayer, this vision of having to plant 1 million indigenous plants in 5 years. I had no idea how on earth it would happen, but I prayed and I trusted, and I understood that other people were going to come and be a part of this, like Sanctorum, and maybe like some of you that are listening to this presentation right now, that you have ideas, that you have land, that you have trees, that you have the fire in your heart, the courage to put something together somewhere where you can bring this knowledge and work out, where we can go to people and teach them how to plant their own food and how to become food sovereign, or whatever that it is. So I'm seeing, as I move and as I have to study these different ecosystems and biomes, that I'm receiving the most amazing education I never thought I would be given. And I'm deeply, deeply grateful for that. And I'm honored to be studying all of these plants and animals, and to be getting to know more people through this very amazing project. And to know that we're all, we're all working on things together in our own way. And this is part of an ecosystem, it's part of a community, it's part of a family, and it's part of understanding our role and coming into it and respecting that of others, which is essentially what we need to do with one another and our ecosystems. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Thank you, everyone, so much. Very, very grateful and happy once again to share this work and to just have a space at the Sustainable Living Conference to talk about sacred ecology and soil regeneration and regenerative reforestation and these deeper meditations and introspections that, if done with a good heart, just lead us to want to help others and uplift our environment. So thank you, everyone.
The earth is home to billions of families. There are those in the seas and those in the skies. There are the ones we share the land with and the ones beneath our feet. Human beings, we're the minority. There are more living organisms in a single teaspoon of healthy soil than there are people on the planet. On August 8th, join Root to Heaven's Origins, unearthing the root of solutions for people, plants, and planet. With world-renowned pioneers in regeneration, leading ecologists and earth activists covering everything from soil and food health to family forests, plant telepathy, and sacred economics. Register today.
And I would love to open to questions or comments or ideas.
Check, check. This work?
Very well.
That sounds good. Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you again. Can we actually give it up for Nicole again? That was awesome. I wanted to mention, first of all, that was so educational for me and so fascinating to learn more about the home that we live in from you, from a distance. That's really beautiful. And it was also so revealing and so fascinating what you mentioned about this being a desert, but also being very biodiverse. Because Wida and I just moved into the barn, and it's great, but it's also not entirely animal proof. And so when you're out on the land, it seems like there's not that many life forms compared to like a jungle. But then when you're in the barn and you have like, a space to pay attention, it's amazing because there's just like, all these animal like spiders and moths and wind scorpions and beetles, and they're all over, like things I've never heard. We have like lizards coming around. It's just mind-boggling, and it actually feels like I'm in a maloca in Peru. I've lived in Peru, and it's really funny how living in the barn in the desert and living in a maloca in the jungle actually feel really similar. You just have all these critters and creatures coming around to hang out. So that was kind of connecting the dots for me. And I know there are people here that may be interested in connecting with Root to Heaven that mentioned that they know people who actually donate trees at a large scale that could help with the project here. So I just want to open it up to questions, but yeah, that was my comment.
Amazing. Thank you. One of the favorite species of animals that I found, there's two. There's fox mice, and there are donkey deer. So it's like deer with donkey ears. So if you see one, take a picture and send it to me because I really want to see this. Anyway, I'm so happy, and I'm so happy to hear from everyone. Thank you all again very, very much.
Thanks, Nicole.
Hello, thank you. My name is Stefania, and I just have a simple question. You said that you have 7 plants that you're going to start here at Sanctorum, and I was just curious what those 7 plants were. I kind of grew up, well, not kind of, I actually grew up out here, so I know how biodiverse it is out here, and I know how important the wild grasslands are. And my dad always told me that this is a prairie desert, and to just get used to the cactus everywhere.
Definitely. Thank you for the question. It's a really good one. So we're planting two different kinds of prairie clover. One of them is purple and one of them is white. These are nitrogen fixers. They're amazing for the ecology of the soil. We have lead plant, which is also a really, really beautiful, um, it's a weed, and cream false indigo, which is a flowering weed. All of these weeds, all of these grasses, these seeds are going to be pollinator friendly. So they're going to give a lot of food and resources to bats, which are very, very present in that area, to butterflies, to bees, to all kinds of birds. So those are the first four. We also have the fire bee balm, which is a specific native plant to that area, which is really, really uh, bright fire red bee balm, which obviously is going to be good for the bees. The Yucca glauca is a soapweed. That's also something that we'll be planting quite a lot of, and prairie wild rose. And this are the 7 plants that we are going to begin to build the forest floor with. Those are the plants. We also have a lot more than just the plants for the building of the soil. We have manure, we have compost, we have wood chips, we have mycorrhiza, and we have a bunch of local timber as well that we're going to be using to rebuild that forest. So thanks for your question. And hopefully if you're around, you can come and plant with us.
My question is, so I live over in the San Luis Valley, and it's a little bit different desert than here, but I will be rewilding 400 acres. That is, we have 3 agricultural artesian wells. And I was just wondering if you could make some suggestions of what to plant and whether, where to get the seeds and the plants, whether to go up into the local mountains and dig stuff up and plant it down there, or gather seeds in the fall, or how best to do that, and also what.
Mm-hmm. I am slowly getting an education to become a forester somehow, but it's not one that I have yet. So I wouldn't be able to tell you based on the information that you shared with me what you need to plant and where you need to look. I would have to get all of that information, which is what I'm recommending that you do, and go online and look at what is your agricultural zone, what temperatures are you looking at with your planting, and then from there it sounds like you have a lot of land. You might be living on more than one zone, and understanding from the foundation again, what plants are you going to want to plant there? Do you want to plant a forest? Do you want to plant food? Because there is prairie land and dry land agriculture as well that doesn't damage or deplete the water table or the soil. This is something that I've been studying as we're preparing to go to Colorado with this vision and prayer to manifest a lot of really good and abundant things for the community there and for the neighborhood there too. So, research your zone and look into what valley specifically that you mentioned, what grows there really well, because that's going to be a clue. And then look into and get clear on what you want to recreate. I will say that one of the things that happened where you all live, or where you all are, because I know that some of you that are there today are not from that area, is that there was an agricultural boom there in the early 1900s. And a lot of the people and the practices that came there, they were bringing farming practices and agricultural practices that were for wetland areas. And that depleted the water table and eroded the soil really quickly. And within 30 years, everything dried out. So the ecology that we see today even isn't reflective of the real ecology that existed 130 years ago, 140, 150 years ago in that area. And what I would really advise that you do is look into that ecology and the deeper ecology of the area to see what's possible before you make a decision on how you want to rehabilitate that land. I hope that answered your question.
Hi. I am just wondering if there's something better we could be doing with our cat and dog poop besides putting it in the dumpster.
I have to say I've never heard of cat or dog poop being composted and like used in manure for biomass and to build soil. I've never come across that anywhere. Ducks, chickens, pigs, cattle, sheep, goats, livestock, yes. The reason why their manure is so valuable for the soil is because they're eating all of the weeds and all of the plants that are native to the soil of what's growing there. And then they're eating that and they're putting back the nutrients into the soil that is native and indigenous to that area. And it's part of the ecosystem. And that's why it's wildly and widely used in regenerative agriculture, because it's a whole closed cycle that happens there. I think, and I'm just guessing, that cats and dogs are not consuming red clover and white clover and soapweed and all of these grasses and weeds and medicines and then putting that as an input back into the earth. And maybe that's why it's not used for these practices.
Cool, thank you.
My pleasure.
Hey, Nicole, it's Ian. I just wanted to say thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you even more for coming out here and all the help that you've been giving us. I really appreciated some of the clarity in your presentation around like how we're starting and how we're building from the ground up. I remember when I shared this project on Facebook and we were talking about it and trying to do some fundraising, I received a lot of pushback from one of my friends from using the word reforestation. And he was very concerned about that we were using that word and what we were doing and what the potential damage that we could be doing to the grasslands.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just curious about what kinds of, because there are some trees around here, but I'm curious what the original trees were, or like what the kind of trees that we're going to be planting are.
That's a great question. Also, thank you. I'm so happy to be coming out there and to be doing this project with you all. Thanks for giving us an opportunity to grow in this way and to have the faith and the trust to grow together. And what I can say is I understand 100% why reforestation could be a red flag for people. As I mentioned in the presentation, there's a practice of reforestation that's actually afforestation, and going in and planting 2,000 or 3,000, 4,000 trees of just one kind of tree. And you do that and you feel really good, but you're not addressing the ecology of the soil. You're not addressing the needs of the water table and how it's being shared by maybe thousands of families and thousands of species. And so we are addressing that at Sanctorum by building the soil ecology first. And it's going to take time. And this is a multi-year project. When we come out in July, we'll put about 80,000 seeds into the ground and a couple of bushes and plants for the pollinators. But we won't actually start to plant trees until September. And even then, it's not going to be a lot of trees because we need to make sure that the ecology of the soil and the biodiversity, the nematodes, the earthworms, the fungi, the mycorrhiza, all of it has time to grow and time to establish itself. And if we go in September for the HeartFire Festival and put 1,000, 2,000 trees in the ground, what we're essentially doing is we are going into a very, very young forest floor and taking their nutrients and the ecology, and we're going to make it really difficult for it to build itself. So we will plant some trees in September, and then in the spring, when there's been a beautiful snow and water cycle, and when things have really had the time to come to life, then we'll do a larger planting. And with that said, we're going to be planting all native indigenous trees. And potentially for the agroforestry aspect of it, we will plant some non-indigenous, non-invasive trees that will yield food for wildlife and for the community there and for whoever is going to be around in the neighborhood who could benefit from such a thing and such outputs. Did I answer your question, Ian?
Yes, I just want to say thank you so much because that helps provide me a lot of clarity when I'm trying to explain what we're doing here to some of my sciencey friends who are smarter than me. So.
Hello, I am Padme. I was actually going to ask a very similar question with the trees because the high winds that we have out here is detrimental to gardening, particular greenhouses and stuff that we grow out here. But I think what I'm going to actually bring to the table here is a little bit about the question you brought about the dog and cat waste and even human waste. I have a friend in Tucumcari, New Mexico, who did a eco village very similar to what they're doing here, and it's very desert down there, and they had absolutely no water. And after 1 year of bringing these plants and actually inoculating his soil, he was able to, they actually had the county come in. They're like, why do you have tall grass on your property? You're not allowed to water. We're on a no watering right now for this year. They didn't get one single drop of rain. And it's basically just because of implementing these practices into this particular climate and the crypto that's around here that resides on the soil to help keep it down from erosion has been really important to what we're creating here. So I would ask a mycologist about that, as I know there's people who are actually using their human waste, and it's about a 5-year process of inoculating it where you can use this as compost for your gardens and stuff. So just wanted to bring that since my question was previously answered.
Your first question, though, can you just ask it again? Because I think there was something in there that we could expound upon a little bit more.
Yeah, it was about the high winds in this area being detrimental. Yeah,
I got it. Okay, thank you so much. So yes, high winds. And one of the really amazing things that we can do by implementing the biomass, particularly timber from locally fallen timber, it serves as a climate buffer. And this is one of the things that we were talking about doing, maybe like even in this first phase, is gathering local timber to build some berms to create a sense of protection while things are vulnerable. Once they're established and strong, they're not going to need that, and actually they're going to provide that for the areas around them. So regarding the human waste, I've heard the same thing. I'm not sure that that is going to be a practice that we implement, but I think the ingenuity and the need is giving us so many amazing solutions, and it's really inspiring to hear that people are rehabilitating their land using whatever they had. There's an entire kind of theory, philosophy, practice on the principles of multifunctionality in permaculture. and the agroeconomy of permaculture. And part of that is whatever is freely available, don't treat it like it only has one purpose. Really understand the different ways that it can be used and the different functions in the ecosystem. And I think this is very much a beautiful metaphor for a community as well. So each of us bring a lot of different qualities and talents and characteristics, and it's good to cultivate all of those different things in the service of creating something very strong and larger than us. Thank you, Padma, for your question.
Okay, I have a quick comment. It's Yash again. I just wanted to mention something we were talking about on a phone call with Nicole and the community of residents here. I was kind of expressing how I feel that there's also going to be not only scientific research dimension to what we're growing, but an intuitive dimension. And I sent a dream that I had. There was a vision that came in a dream not long ago. I sent to our group thread with Nicole, where there was a very particular appearance to the land here. And there were apple blossoms growing around. And it was interesting because that's not what you'd think of in terms of 100% native species. And then we actually had somebody local and native in their lifetime to this region come and talk to us just yesterday at this conference about just kind of in passing in a casual conversation how they've grew up here, they've grown trees here, apples grow the best. And so when you mentioned growing some different species that might be able to feed people, I think there's been kind of visions from different people about, oh, maybe we can grow fruit, maybe this and that can happen. And so just researching how to then balance that inspiration and that intuitive vision with the research about what could be damaging and what to avoid so that we can refine the plan practically. Just wanted to mention that, and also say that I really appreciate what you said, Nicole, about the trees themselves providing a windbreak, because that's another aspect of the intelligence, despite the problems with all of the agriculture that happens here. There's also an intelligence that we could also learn from the people that live here and that already are familiar with the area. And so we probably will plant a few mature trees as a windbreak that could protect the seedlings and so on. But there's another question. So if you want to respond, otherwise I'll pass it to the question.
I do. I just want to say in this kind of these principles of multifunctionality, like looking at the different types of trees and the different types of actors in the role in the play, fruits create windbreaks. Nuts are associated with fire control. The essential oil plants are a wildlife habitat. Timber is a climatic buffer. Biomass and mulch, they're soil conditioners. Animal foraging cycles the water and helps the water cycle. And medicine plants, herbs, they actually help with evapotranspiration. So it makes sure that the water that's being evaporated comes back to the same environment. So there's just so much wealth and richness and intelligence in the architecture of nature and what we can learn. And I'm really looking forward to that. And I think it's even worth having a town hall with local people that have been developing land, that have been growing things, where we can interchange and cross-pollinate ideas and knowledge together to build something really special. Thanks, Yasha.
Hi, my name's Ambra, and I work for Boulder County. And we've invested in some different carbon offset funds. And I'm just wondering, these projects that you're working on, is it set up that the carbon offsets go to the people that are planting, or is this something that you have public that people can purchase?
No one has purchased any carbon offsets for us. These are conversations that we're just beginning to have, because we are planting a lot of trees, a lot of plants, a lot of seeds, and a lot of people, counties, organizations, corporations, trusts are investing in carbon offsets. And maybe, Ambra, if you would be so kind and generous to just give a 2-minute explanation of what a carbon offset is, so that we can all be on the same page about what you're talking about.
Sure. So just to give you an example, so I manage a cannabis cultivation fund in Boulder County that the cultivators pay into. And so we're constantly looking for projects to offset their energy use. A lot of these cultivators have very high intensive energy use. And so we did, like an RFP out to find projects. But the biggest one that we found came from a company called Blue Source. So they're basically a carbon broker that invests in some different projects. We ended up going with one in Alaska on some tribal land is where we actually ended up investing the money. But because of the carbon sequestration from these, from the plants, they, have, huge impact on the carbon offsets that you could purchase. So like this industry, the cannabis industry, they're looking for ways to basically, offset that energy use.
Yeah, and we're open to receiving that for carbon outputs as Root to Heaven for all of the projects we have in the pipeline, which is not just in Colorado, although it would be wonderful to have investment to fund the projects that we're doing right now. We're working with very little and we're making miracles happen, and I'm very grateful for that. But there's so many people asking for help to rehabilitate land and to regenerate land and reforest land and to teach them how to grow their own food. And in order to do this, we obviously need support from companies and people like yourself who are looking into how to offset their carbon footprint. So this is a deeper conversation that we can have, but it's something that we should all be aware of. This is a $26.7 billion industry where people are buying carbon credits to offset whatever practices that their companies are doing. And so there's a lot of wealth inside of what we're doing, and to understand that and to figure out ways to be able to support our good work with the resources that are available to us. I don't know if I answered your question. Could you confirm or not?
Yes, it sounds like this is in development. This is what you're working on. So that's great. Yeah, it was very hard to find, even any projects close to Colorado, right? So, I think that this is awesome.
And for next year, if it's an ongoing thing for next year, we would love the support because it's going to take many, many tens of thousands of dollars and several years to create the kind of regenerative reforestation project that we're creating at Sanctorum. So the most amount of help that we can get and the most financial support that we can get, it really allows us to go in and do our work and to do it at a really good level. And there's a lot of different resources. Money is one of them, time is another. And if we have the equipment and the infrastructure that we need because we're well funded, it will obviously allow us to move deeper into the ecology and into the regeneration. So thank you, Embra. And we are working on it, and we are working alongside a very amazing organization that isn't a carbon broker, but does definitely help connect people to projects, and we're in talks with them now to see what we can do together. And part of that will be developing technology that is going to accurately track impact, because right now everything that's out there is very fluffy, and we need precision because this is science. And we want people to know that we're taking our work seriously and our word is really important. And we're out there. I'm out there almost every day. I get home at sundown, which now where I live is around 9. And I usually have a bunch of dirt caked under my fingernails because I'm out planting seeds and trees and food and all of these things every day. And that has value to it that is now finally becoming quantifiable, but it also needs to be traceable and trackable so that people can invest in Root to Heaven, in the work that we're doing in our projects, which we have so many. We have Mexico, Guatemala, we have Honduras, we have a lot of energy in the South, Colombia, and we want to make sure that people feel really good about what they're giving money to, because it is honest work and it will get done at a really high level of integrity. So thanks for bringing that into the conversation. I wasn't expecting that would be brought up.
Yeah, thank you. Ambra, right? Okay, beautiful. Yeah, and also I don't know if this is relevant at all, but just for any route to heaven work at Sanctorum in Colorado, uh, if it's relevant, we have the 501c3 status as well. So we have a very trusting and long-term connection with Route to Heaven. So they're more than welcome to use our nonprofit status, however is needed for their work in Colorado. And also would be curious to hear more about your work in Colombia, because Wyatt and I might go down there and see if we can do HeartFire or another Sanctorum or something. Padme has I think another question or comment, and then I don't know if there's any last questions or comments after that, but the legendary Mike Word just popped in the building, which is amazing. I'm so stoked you're here, brother, and super excited for your green building presentation and maybe some freestyle together later. See what happens. We'll get into that in a sec, but I just wanted to give kind of this last question to Padme, and then I'd really love for all of you to please like take a quick bio break if you need. And then we're going to come right back in here and bring anyone else who's missing for Mike Word's presentation. So I'm super excited for that. Please be here. But we'll take a quick break after this question and say, fare thee well for the moment to Nicole. Here we go. Oh, two last questions. Bloom gets the special treatment.
Okay, great.
Cool. I actually wanted to speak to these carbon credits that are something that's being given out to businesses so they can offset their energy use. I think it's beautiful because it allows funding to go to these beautiful like routes to heavens to create the better ecosystems in the new world that we're trying to that we actually are building collectively. And I just also would love to see these carbon credits come with a stample for these businesses who are using these high amount of energy uses to actually be educated, particularly like the marijuana or medical cannabis industries, which are really sustainable energy when done in a proper way. Growing outdoors actually does really good for the soil in the system, and for them to be using high amounts of energy that need to be offset, there's an education part that's missing in this thing. So this is obviously a bigger conversation than what's really going on, but I just want to bring awareness that yes, this is great that it's taken place, and there's something bigger that isn't just like covering up a problem by giving money to a system that is actually doing good. We're actually not creating better, we're just creating what is already sustained to stay sustained. So I would love to see those carbon credits actually decrease where there's not allowed the amount of carbon credits to be out there, and an education raised so eventually there's no more carbon credits and we're all on the same page. So just wanted to make that point.
Oh, I really appreciate you saying that, because we can't put a band-aid on a broken bone and expect things to get better. And we've passed the space of sustainability in terms of nature and ecology. We need regeneration. We would have had to stop the consumption and the growth and the expansion and extraction and all of these things many years ago, many decades ago, and in order to sustain our environment the way that it was. And now we're just way beyond that. Now we need to regenerate it. And part of this is, first thing is first, it's really great that these things are happening. And the second thing is awesome. And now the education. The one thing that I'm not I don't really know too much about CBD and that industry and anything like this, but what I do know is that it can be an invasive species, and a lot of the time what's I've heard is a problem and what I've studied and read as a problem is that it's planted as a monocrop, and that actually contributes to soil erosion. So I think there's a really interesting space there in terms of education and how to plant that in permaculture, how to plant that in like a more biodiverse way that's going to actually strengthen an ecosystem and a habitat and not deplete it. On top of what you're saying, go outside, there's sun, there's rain, there's water, there's soil, there's all of these things already available. And maybe, slowly phasing out of needing to use so much electricity is really something that we all want to look at when we're talking about planting and growing food and medicine. Thank you, Padma.
Hi, I'm Bloom. I'll be brief because I know we're wrapping up, but what you just shared actually leads in perfectly to what I was about to say. And that is, I think carbon credits is a good start. And beyond that is ecological regeneration, because there's so much more than just carbon that goes into ecological restoration. And I bring this up because I have a friend who was working for this big company that was visually, when you looked at their website, it looked like they were doing the most reforestation on the planet and just such a successful big company. And they got this huge grant from Google to plant hundreds of thousands of trees. They went to a valley, planted a bunch of trees in a row and left them. And he realized that none of the trees were going to survive. He brought it up to the people that were leading the project, and they said, this is the extent of our contract. There's nothing else we can really do about it. And so he quit and he started his own company and is trying to bring in more actual permaculture, ecological regeneration, biodiversity, to actually have a plan for ensuring that we're not just planting trees, but we're actually making ecosystems that are going to thrive. And yeah, I'm just bringing that up because there's so much possibility with that too. Like with you mentioning hemp, there's this big concrete factory near Lyons, and apparently they're actually following all the rules, being as environmental as they can for a concrete company. I saw there's a massive field, empty field in front of them, and I thought, what if big concrete company funds massive hemp regeneration projects to make hempcrete, hemp textiles, soil regeneration? And I feel like all of these big companies are ready to do things like this. It's just about presenting the opportunities for them.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah. And I mean, that's what we're doing. We're rehabilitating entire ecosystems, regenerating entire ecosystems. And so, you know, it's a different than just like reforestation and, you know, taking a huge amount of money and planting tens of thousands of trees and not having an irrigation system for them, or not having protection for them against the local species or native animals and wildlife. And I think this is a really good point. And I think this is just kind of like casualty of the situation, is that as companies turn more towards rehabilitation and ecological consciousness, that there's going to be some casualties, and that it's going to be a growing process, and it's going to be a process of raising awareness on what actually needs to be done, and also not being afraid to call people out and say, hey, this is total greenwashing. Like, where is your project now? And I think this is why transparency is so important. And as I was mentioning earlier, why having real technology that tracks impact and where things are for an extended period of time is fundamental to the work that we're doing, and the integrity of the new paradigm of ecology and ecological consciousness that we're building for the world. So thank you, Bloom.
Woo! Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you all.
I guess you couldn't see most of us, but there's a recording. So we're so glad we could see you, and we're really grateful for this presentation. Thank you again. She can't see you, but the camera's over there. Anyways, we love you. It's good to see you. We'll see you again soon. And
Thank you.
Harriet Brainerd, who you mentioned, is also talking at this event. But send the event info for your next Route to Heaven offering that I think we're also contributing to. So let's get the word out about that to this group soon. And yeah, thanks, Bloom, for bringing that up. We've got to keep the plants watered, so it takes a community. Yeah, thank you, Nicole.
Thank you all. Have a beautiful rest of your day and rest of your Sustainable Living Conference. I'll be tuning in for all of the talks that are available on Zoom. Many, many blessings and so much love and so much gratitude.
Thank you, Nicole. Peace.
Our mission is peace.